Bon dia a tothom. Thank you very much to the Govern de les Illes Balears and Fundació BIT for inviting us to take part in this seminar. For us, it's a great opportunity not only to explain what is Airbnb, but also to reflect with you on the sharing economy and on the same concepts that have been shared in the previous interventions. For us, as a business, we feel absolutely engaged in innovation, and innovation also means understanding all this technological change and how we can work together with governments, with the traditional sector, with grassroots organizations, and very importantly with consumers, on how to develop these concepts and how to develop these business models. So following the previous interventions, I will quickly summarize our vision on the sharing economy. Definitely we're talking about a historical phenomenon, a change of paradigm, something that goes beyond one single business model. Basically, and building up on what it has been said so far, we're shifting from a 20th century perspective where the access to credit, the mass publicity, and the obsession for property, and a relationship between a producer and a consumer, unilateral, is being replaced by a more 21st century perspective where the online reputation is replacing credit, the power of the community is replacing and the networks of people are replacing the old mass publicity, and where the shared access to assets are basically overrunning the old obsession for property. And actually, very importantly, it appears a new relationship between users. The role of the consumer is being enriched. If traditionally the consumer had this passive role of being a client of a service, suddenly we see how, thanks to the new technologies and the new peer-to-peer platforms, the passive role becomes more active, and the roles of producer and consumer are very, very easily interchangeable. So, in this context, how did Airbnb start? It did actually start quite randomly when 3 young entrepreneurs in San Francisco took the opportunity of a large design conference in the city where all the hotels were fully booked to host in their place 3 attendants to the conference. They created this platform, they created this web page, and actually as a kind of a joke, very, very much smiling, they called it Air Bed and Breakfast, because actually they hosted the visitors with airbeds put on the floor in the living room. It wasn't only the fact that it revealed itself as a good business idea, they also found that the personal relationship between the guest and the host were bringing something more meaningful than a typical commercial transaction. And this connects with the power of the community we discussed before. And basically the platform, the Airbnb platform, has developed since as a technological tool designed to put in contact 2 peers in a context of transparency and trust. Airbnb basically is an information society tool that creates different tools that allow trust to happen between 2 unknown people that have all the power on the transaction, all the power on the booking. The host and the guest agree on the price, agree on the dates, agree on every single condition of the booking. And that's very important in the context of the sharing economy, in the context of peer-to-peer platforms, because that's what it makes it different from other business models in the e-commerce sector or in every sector in the past. Basically, the individuals become the main characters and become active consumers, not only locally, but globally, and with interchangeable roles. So basically, we are talking about real people and real meaningful experiences at a global scale. This is all about Airbnb, and that's how the platform has been designed. I don't know how many of you have used the Airbnb platform. I could ask you to raise your hands, those who have used it. Fantastic, quite a few. You will see and you will know that the profiles are very wide, that the images are extensive, that the ratings and online reputation tools are intense, and this is made for a purpose. This is made precisely to provide this transparency, to provide this trust. So here I would like to show you how this business model grew over the last years and achieved these figures in 2015. So since 2008, more than 15 million people have traveled using Airbnb around the world. There are Airbnb hosts in more than 34,000 cities, in more than 191 countries, plus Cuba, because we were the first American company to give meaning of the new good relationships between the US and Cuba. And in August, we achieved the peak of 1.5 million people staying on Airbnb in one single night. So here I'm not talking about Airbnb only. I'm showing these numbers to prove that this goes beyond the trend, that this goes beyond a given business model. The sharing economy, it's really an innovative, a technological change that is changing the way we travel, but the way we consume, the way we exchange, the way we actually understand our identity online. So, as my intervention today, they asked me to talk about impacts. I'm going to talk about impacts. And for us, again, it's important. I'm part of the public policy team at Airbnb. Our job, precisely, is at the same time as we grow, to analyze, to study what's the sharing economy, what is our role in the sharing economy, and show these impacts and share these impacts with the society, and very particularly with governments and the regulators. I'm going to show you data that are global. These are global trends that come from the different economic impact studies we've been producing in the different international cities in the world. We see consistently different trends. In every city, we could nuance the indicators, but the trends are homogeneous and very, very consistent. We see how the majority of hosts and properties are located outside the main traditional tourism areas in every city. We see that, generally speaking, guests stay twice longer and spend 2 times more money than traditional tourists. This it's connected to the very nature, to their very interest. When we are actually, you will see later that they are showing more interest for a local experience, and this helps to understand lots of these indicators. Very importantly, 50% of Airbnb hosts spend their money in the neighborhoods where their listings are. This helps us spread visitors to those areas that traditionally didn't benefit directly from tourism. It has positive impacts in local businesses and neighborhood businesses. In terms of host profile, we see how globally most of our hosts are sharing the home where they live. And this is crucial for us as we are actually helping introduce a new model of accommodation that sometimes that shouldn't be confused with traditional models of accommodation. It's simply sharing your home in a non-professional way, in a non-regular way, has interesting implications in terms of how to open the door to these new activities. We see that how globally our hosts, 50% of them have low or moderate income levels. in the south of Europe, if we go to the economic impacts we've done, it's a bit higher than this. We can see that in Barcelona, 75% of hosts are or in the average or below the average of the medium income in Catalonia, or in Madrid, 60% of the hosts are equal or below this average. Interestingly enough, 47% of hosts said that the income they received by Airbnb helped them stay in their homes, so afford the cost of living and precisely the cost of housing. When we address the guest profile, or what kind of guest this experience is attracting to cities and destinations, we see how 76% are interested in exploring a specific neighborhood, and 89% are state that they want to live like a local. Again, they are seeking a more meaningful experience. Finally, on global impacts, I'm not an expert and I won't go into details, but as these collaborative consumption models don't need building more or creating new assets, but on the contrary, it's all about making a more efficient use of existing assets. These models are extremely competitive in terms of water, energy savings, and greenhouse emissions and waste management. So we saw that the environmental impacts are relevant, are important globally. And now I would like to share with you one case study that starts with the same impacts, and I would end with a reflection on how we dealt with the governments, how we dealt with the country in this case, on how to understand the sharing economy and develop fair regulations that is allowing this market to grow, and that is setting a benchmark for the rest of Europe. I must say that this is not the only good experience we have in Europe. The same kind of conversation I'm going to explain now we have had in the Netherlands, we have had in the UK, we have had in the north of Italy, in Milan, we have had in Portugal, we have had in different jurisdictions that curiously surround Spain, where we are now. It's also interesting to know that France is the first Airbnb destination in the world, and Paris is the first Airbnb city in the world. So it's not only a good example of developing fair regulations and clever agreements on how to take the most of the sharing economy, but is also relevant in business terms. So, again, since 2008, 5 million people have visited France thanks to Airbnb. This means 150,000 accommodations. This is also quite similar to Spain. Guests coming from America represent a 16%, and coming from Europe represent the majority of the guests. 72% of the guests state that their experience through Airbnb helped them wish coming back to France again. And as we saw before in the global trends, the guest is seeking for a meaningful experience. 91% want to live like a local. 74% of Airbnb accommodations are outside the hotel district. It doesn't mean that there are not Airbnb listings on the hotel district, but it really has a capacity to spread to other neighborhoods. The average price is 40 euros per night, and the average stay in length of stay in France is 4.2 nights. Again, this is quite similar to Spain. It's basically twice longer than the typical tourist. It helps the host to make ends meet. 52% in France are low to moderate income. 53% of hosts state that it helps them to stay in their homes or afford the housing costs. Earnings are used to pay regular household expenses. This is 48% in France. In Barcelona, the economic impact study we did, it was 60% of the host who stated that. And interestingly, the income they make, it's a complement for the main source of income. So it's clearly a non-professional activity for the majority of the hosts. These data are very, very similar to the economic impact studies we did in Madrid and Barcelona, which are the only ones we've done in Spain. It's all around 300, 350 euros income average. A little bit more indirectly, but quite relevant, we see positive impacts in encouraging entrepreneurship, in supporting entrepreneurship, in supporting other sectors such as the seniors and the elder people. I will start by entrepreneurship. We see, for example, in Spain, how 30% of Spanish hosts have their own business, and 70% of them state that the money they make with Airbnb help them boost their own businesses. And as we say in Spain quite regularly, and I'm sure that many of you will understand me, it also helps to change mentalities. It also helps to change mentalities in countries where entrepreneurship has not been in our DNA. So we see this as an indirect positive impact. I mentioned the seniors. We see how the people, the elder people, retired people, see in hosting an activity that it doesn't only provide them supplementary income, but also give a meaningful activity for their lives and really develops their quality of living. And then talking about the local economy, we also say, again, that they stay longer than the typical visitor, that they spend more than the typical visitor, that they spend more in the neighborhood where they are staying. In Paris, it's 42%. In Barcelona, it's 40%. In Madrid, it's 43%. So we are talking that neighborhoods like La Latina in Madrid, like Nou Barris in Barcelona, are seeing how there is direct economic impact. We could even say that for the first time coming from tourism. And then, obviously, it also generates taxes for the country. Then we see how in France, Airbnb is included in all the official statistics, in all the official communications. It's part of the ecosystem of the tourism industry. In a moment where the traditional industry is also growing. So there where Airbnb is, also the tourism industry grows. And this applies to Spain as well. There's another aspect which is also interesting. How useful it is, the sharing economy in this context, when big events happen, when big events that really puts the cities under stress in terms of capacity of coping with more visitors. We have the French examples here, but we could actually proudly say that we will be official partners of the Rio Olympic Games, which is actually a milestone for any sharing economy company. This happened because we were already informal partners of the World Cup in Brazil. I think it's 2 or 3 years ago. And actually, up to 20% of the visitors for the World Cup stayed on an Airbnb in Brazil. That was particularly useful, not for the country, but for those cities where they had a stadium, where they had games, but they didn't really have a stable infrastructure. So this flexibility, this empowerment of locals to take part in this activity really helps the city in these big events. And we are seeing how the cities are taking advantage of it and are adding this as an interesting angle. Finally, I would like to share with you this French case as a concrete example, but I would like to emphasize that these kind of conversations we're having with different governments, with different players, with different grassroots organizations. Basically, the conversation we had in France was creating or developing fair regulations for this activity that are proportionate, that are well adapted to the figure of the host, in a non-professional context, in a non-regular context, and complement this by tools developed by the platform, such as the collect and remit tool. The platform, on behalf of the host, will collect the tourist tax and remit it to the French government. So, and then we can see how the French government meets with our CEO, includes Airbnb in the official report on tourism figures by the end of the summer, or as you can see in this slide, the City Hall, the Paris City Hall, celebrated with Airbnb the fact that they became the first world destination on Airbnb. So we see how first they amended the housing law in France in order to make sure that the host in primary residence had no restrictions to share their homes with visitors. Primary residence can be shared without any registration process in France until they reach 4 months of activity. And for secondary residences, the actual requirements are set up by municipalities. Finally, we see how we are collecting, on behalf of the host, the tourist tax. We started implementing in Paris. It will be deployed in other French cities. It's also working in Amsterdam and in 5 more American cities. And this is yet an example of the different tools that technological platforms can do in these conversations with the regulators, in these conversations with the users community. Finally, and just to finish, I would like to emphasize this idea. I mean, we've seen in the presentation from Dr. Diretz, we've seen the presentation before. It's very important that in a context of innovation, all the players involved spend their time understanding the phenomenon, defining concepts at all levels, first from the academia, from the business models, and it's also very, very important that the regulator understand that with all regulations, non-adapted regulations, it's so difficult to work, and it's also important for them to understand the right angle, the right perspective, and develop fair rules, fair adapted rules, which actually goes primarily in benefit of the consumer and in benefit of the economic development of the cities. And that was everything from my side. Thank you very much.